I'm so scared.
Alright then, mate, here we go. You know, there's nothing quite like a good horror film. Nothing quite like the feeling a good scare can give you. That real, kind of tangible fear creeping up your spine. Real horror show, that is. Anxiety, apprehension, your heart's pumping. You're focused on what's ahead of you. You might be shaking a bit. Maybe want to hoy. Might be thinking of just up and running away. It's that thrill that I find so appealing. And maybe one of the reasons I keep coming back to the horror as genre. Movies and Noah. I really like all low-budget horror movies.
And yet you never once watch anything that I recommend.
In the last thing I watched that you recommended me, that was the first Leprechaun movie. You lost your right to recommend me anything after that one.
In my defense, I didn't recommend anything. We were both drunk, and I wanted to watch it. You just happened to be there.
And I still maintain that it was Drac. That movie was terrible. And you know it.
We had been drinking, and I know what kind of shit you like to watch.
Which is what I'm trying to talk about right now. Horror movies. I just don't find the appeal of the fast-paced, explosive horror, explicit gore, or intense scenes of action.
Oh yes, kind of like how you wandered around an empty, foggy town in Silent Hill for 4 hours.
I find all that interesting. Little details, things you can miss, but if you're looking and you're really interested, you'll find all kinds of things. The little strands of lore you find, you know, this and that, journal entries, different descriptions you get when you look at something.
I remember you don't like fast-paced or whatever else that is that you do.
Yeah, Roy, I really...
Did you even make it to the other side? You know, that other world?
No.
Yes, slow before.
In games, if you die, you restore. Much of that feeling of horror that can be lost. If you die too many times, forced to restore, that sense of horror becomes frustration.
Is that why you've never completed a single horror game? At least even the ones I remember.
Doing something over and over again, unable to progress. That's not fear. That's frustration, maybe tedium. Fear is going to be lost.
And just to pull this discussion back to the topic, that's why you like found footage?
That's right. Thanks for keeping us on topic. And so I'll be nice and explain that one now, well, no way.
I don't know why, but you seem to like it.
It's not just found footage. What I find, though, maybe where I can find most appealing in that kind of thing, is the kind of horror film that's constrained by a low budget. They gotta keep it tight.
Yeah, you like low-budget horror films. I can't count how many times you've gone and produced some questionable cinematic abomination, forced me to watch it. Low quality, film grain and all.
Come off it. Not like you don't know what we're getting into. We're watching them because they're bad. And I'm a fan of that kind of thing.
Maybe when I'm drunk. What was that last movie we watched?
Yeah, okay, you don't need to remind me of that one. Bit of a letdown.
I don't know, but his attitude's starting to piss me off.
Look, we're not talking about that one. Not exactly, not specifically. We got other things to discuss.
And why not? Isn't that the exact thing we're talking about?
As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, we are now approaching today's location.
That's a low budget. That's found footage. And it's horror. At least it was supposed to be. I found it horrifying for other reasons. Mostly my boredom.
All right, mate. You know everyone makes mistakes. Just because it was bad, just because it had those basic elements of what I like, what I'm interested in, doesn't mean it's gonna be good.
It even had that one guy in what's his name? The actor. You know, from all those other really bad movies you've made me watch.
I don't know. It's a mystery to me.
Yeah, they might have used his name to sell it. He's barely in it after all.
Are you frightened yet, boy?
That happens all the time. It's not exactly a point in its favor, but it does happen. Well, really, we're not here to talk just about that movie. No, right now.
No, I think we are. That movie, I think it's typical of the genre of found footage. They're all really boring, slow, kind of meandering. And they're just really not well made, and they don't hold my attention. They're downright boring. There's no spectacle.
Look, you say what you will, but that's just your opinion, and it doesn't make it true. Can't exactly stand on that as fact. But I buried the lead on this one long enough. This is about what I like about low-budget horror, and how found footage is able to use our limited budget as a strength rather than a weakness. Something it has going for it, points in its favor.
Barry, really, I hate found footage.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen. We're here, in the Pine Barrens, southern New Jersey.
I've seen some low-budget movies that do some interesting things. Old films that are good for what they are, but found footage is it's just awful. Low-budget movies, they can work within their limitations.
I wish I had you all alone.
Even make do with the limited effects. But those movies we're talking about, that you're talking about, I just don't see the appeal. It's all shaking camera angles. The excuse to show nothing happening over the course of 90 minutes or so,
2 more hours
only
max.
to have a jump scare here or there. More shaking, jerky camera movements, just trying to mask that simple fact that nothing is happening. And they don't want to spend any money to make any visually appealing effects. It's not visual, it's just shaking, and you can never see anything.
Look, mate, I get where you're coming from, but you're just wrong. Well, you're wrong and you're not wrong. It's a matter of perspective. What you might think of as slow, meandering, tedious, nothing happening, as you might say. Someone else could argue that it's atmospheric, suspenseful, a little tense.
And I suppose that you're the one saying that? It's still slow, plodding. Fleece the audience out of money.
I'll come off it, mate. What I'm trying to say is it's a matter of perspective. It's subjective, in opinion. Sometimes, do some of them do it a little better than others? I can't argue with you on that. Sometimes, movies are filled with a lot of nothing. Found footage and naught.
You're right, and it's my opinion that found footage is just a cheap excuse.
Hey, look, shut your face.
An excuse to be cheap, to make a bad movie, and have people defend it. They are slow, they are dull, and someone doesn't have to spend a lot of money to make one of those. It's like when a movie has their characters wandering around a forest for the majority of its runtime. Yeah, it's a way to save money, but it's just so uninteresting.
Come on, mate. Like I said, they've got what going for them. You can't say that.
You're going to defend it.
You're bloody right, I'ma defend it.
Fine, go right ahead. Let me hear it. What is it you have to say in defense of this, of the undefensible?
Shoot it. We'll never get anywhere at this rate. Okay. For me, horror movies rely on a couple of things. A focus on characters, characterization, and a suspension of disbelief.
Isn't that most movies?
Well, you will ray of sunshine and hope.
Why even state that? You might as well have just said you'd need to breathe or the sky is blue.
Bloody hell, mate, you give me a headache.
That's just obvious.
Look, just listen. Characters are important to any story.
Hi, Pumpkin. So what's this mommy tells me? You're afraid of monsters in the bed?
And so is believability. A story can focus on its characters, give them some characterization, develop them a bit, so the audience can learn more about them, get to know them, at least as well as your best mate. Like them, hate them, anything. Just care.
No, you want to stay here. You want to film rocks. You want to look around. You want to fucking.
And what if the character is an asshole?
They just need to care about them.
What if I don't like them? What if I don't want to know anything more about them? What if I just want to see something bad happen to them? There's plenty of things like that.
Then the movie did enough to make you care about them. Wanted to see them get that comeuppance. Meet a bloody unfortunate end. That sort of thing. You don't need to like them, but you need to care about what happens to them. You need to know enough to care, to want to see what comes next.
I'm gonna get that son of a bitch.
Look, I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just, there's a lot of... Is it really crucial to any story that you know the characters? You definitely could get away with... I'm sure there's been a few movies made that you really don't care either way about the characters in them. I don't know. I'm not saying that it would be a good movie. It's just that there are movies where the audience doesn't care about the characters. There has to be.
It might not be crucial. I could chuck a couple on the telly right now, see what you think of them. I generally don't go for that kind of thing. The lack of focus on characters, well, it means they need to focus on something else. And usually, in a horror movie, that means more action or more of the nasty, sex, drugs, gore, that kind of thing.
I would have said sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
There's gonna be sex, drugs, rock and roll.
But sure, a movie does have to show something. Has to fill the screen or the page with something. You can't just have nothing there.
Yeah, that's the phrase, isn't it? But otherwise, it wouldn't be a very long movie. Imagine a film where the focus is on a killer, but you don't know anything about them or their victims. What do you imagine that might look like?
What, the film just shows the killer in the act? The perpetrator just shows up and attacks someone, probably kills them and maybe move on.
And repeat. That might be just one way to do it. The whole process, it doesn't take very long. It would probably need to be quick. How long do you have before the audience might lose interest? If you don't care about the characters and just maybe want to see the violence, you might only be able to tease them for so long.
So then the film focuses on just the act itself. The audience might just be watching people be attacked, killed.
If the audience doesn't care about the characters, might only care about the chase for so long. So the scene's length, it can't exactly be lengthy. No, unless you're focusing on the details of something, maybe of stalking, or the violence that's being committed, perpetrated. And doesn't that just sound pleasant to experience?
I really don't know. Even if you're putting each of those kills at, 5 minutes? I don't even know. How do you focus on all of that? It just...
In that kind of movie, if the audience doesn't care about the characters, maybe they are interested in the gore, the graphic details of the violence, including the special or practical effects of it all. Of right spectacle. If you just show someone getting killed, maybe a quick stab of a knife or a slit of the throat, That might not take all that long. How many of those scenes do you think you'll need to fill a movie? And 5 minutes? I'll give you 5 minutes, mate. Even that might be a little too drawn out for a simple stalk and stab. But you go on with those numbers. What do you come up with?
Well, you'll be the expert on that one. What, 18 kills maybe over the course of a movie? That's not saying anything on the enjoyment or the quality. And I do think it might be a little tedious to watch.
And I won't be commenting either way on how entertaining it could be.
I'll agree that might not be for me.
And entertaining or not, if the story is focused on the act, no story at all. You need to fill a certain amount to get to feature length. The story either indulges in the quantity, maybe not the quality, but the description. Instead of indulging in the amount of violence, the story might focus on the details, the graphic nature of that violence. To fill the time, put something on the screen.
In that sense, even if there is no story, something still has to happen in the story, or there isn't a story at all. You say a focus on characters is something that happens, or at least it's something that can fill the time, boost the length of the film. So the film is short or it's boring.
But it doesn't need to be boring. It really doesn't.
Fine.
But yeah, it can be boring if it's not done well or done right. But the same can be said about anything. Sex can be downright lousy if maybe your partner doesn't know what they're doing. Everything can be bad. None of that is my point. In the time a story, in this case a movie, focuses on characters, introducing them, fleshing them out, hopefully able to accomplish a few different things. That being filling up the runtime, the pages, expanding the length of the film, but also making the audience care about those characters. Either we like them or we dislike them, but just so that we want to see what happens next. And hopefully working within the limitations of a small budget. Now, you might not need to spend an excessive amount to have character moments, characterization.
Only look behind the bush. The guy who drove by so fast that when you
Have the audience learn about the characters or connect with them. You could just film a scene of two people walking down a street.
Subtle, isn't he?
At a cafe, something, talking to each other. It's easy on the budget.
Hey, creep.
Films working with a low budget, they need to make good use of them, need to know how to make every dollar count, stretch it where they need to. They need to know how to work within the constraints they've got. And one way is to take advantage of or construct scenes in a way that isn't going to cost your bottom dollar, isn't going to break the budget, the bike, anything. That shook me a see before I get real offended.
What? Are you telling me that low-budget horror, especially found footage, relies on not showing things happening, and instead having characters stand around and talk to each other, just to fill up screen time so they don't have to spend money? That's a terrible argument for why these films are good.
Oi, mate, now you're just being disingenuous. That's a terrible thing. That's an argument in bad faith. Where did I say that? Where did I say any of that? A story, a film can take the time you expand on its characters, spend some time focusing on them, fleshing them out, giving them some depth, characterizing them.
So Lance, how do you feel about show 6?
Feeling good. It's a good location.
A film might take advantage of those scenes, as they won't cost as much, and the money could be spent elsewhere on scenes which may have a higher cost to them. Films that don't have a large budget, they might need to do more of that. A scene of two characters talking, or a character having a meaningful gesture towards their aspirations. Even a tense moment of a character walking down a hallway, unsure of what's ahead of them. Not every movie's gonna have the money to have a bus crash, a chase on the highway, an explosion, buildings popping like popcorn. Not everyone's got the kind of barking that Michael Bay might. Explosions everywhere, everything in the environment being torn apart. It's just not gonna happen.
All right, fine. Yes, that was unfair of me. So, to make more effective use of their budget, you wish to allow the audience to develop some kind of feelings towards the characters. Films should utilize more character-driven moments, some slower scenes, something that's not going to be explosive or overly action-oriented. It might even lack that visceral quality, that bombastic barrage.
All right. Yeah, if you want to call it that, I don't know about any of that. Visceral, bombastic, explosive. Action can have different meanings, so I wouldn't want to use that. But a film, they can make use of other types of scenes to that effect.
Dude, guys.
Something like developing characters. It's a crucial part of horror films, having a character. Without a character, I'm not sure the audience is able to feel the tension, the horror that the genre is supposed to evoke. I think the audience needs to care about something in some way, to be invested in the events, the story, so that they can feel something. Maybe not empathize.
And this isn't a discussion on the horror genre as a whole. This is your defense of the indefensible. We're talking about why found footage films aren't terrible.
The ice maker.
So get to it.
There, yeah, I'm getting there, mate. Take it easy. Have a ciggy, anything. All I'm saying is that they can be good. Not that all of them are. I didn't think I needed to say that, could it? It seemed implicit. But if you want to be a bogan about it, Look, my entire argument is about how they can reliably make use of the constraints and limitations of the genre, the low budget, and that, for the most part, the single camera held by a character within the film. Oh, it's got some strengths to it all its own. Everything revolves around the limits, the limitations of the budget, of the cash on hand, the bank. You gotta do or make do with what you've got.
And I understand that. I get it. I hear what you're saying. I'm not here to argue against it. And,
that's what you're doing.
Well, the application has never really worked for me.
Mate.
In films like Cloverfield, there's just so much shaking that you never see anything, and I've heard people get sick watching it. And then there's films like Blair Witch, where it's just people wandering around the woods without anything happening for nearly the entire runtime. And then there's films where the characters discover some kind of creature or a ghost, and the things, in the special effects, the jaw drops and it screams, and whoever's filming runs away screaming. I really just don't understand the appeal for the subgenre at all.
That's just, mate, I think you're being a bit reductive. I just think, I get that you don't like the films, but you're being a bit reductive. Aren't you being a little harsh on them? Leave it be. I'm still here to disagree with you. Tell you that you're wrong. Everyone's got an opinion, mate, and you're free to be wrong about it.
And maybe I am. But I just don't enjoy them.
I've shown you quite a bit now, haven't I?
I just haven't found one I can enjoy. All of them are garbage, but you just wanted someone to rant at. Don't lie to me.
Oh, you caught me, mate. Not like you had anything better to do, and I do enjoy your company. We're going to talk about this now, aren't we?
Oh, I really don't want to.
Anyway, what was I saying?
I don't know. What were you
Limited
saying?
budgets and all that. Characters. Characterization.
Fuck if I know, okay?
Oh, that's what it was. Believability.
Really,
that's where I was
believability.
headed next. You gotta make sure your story is, well, it's
Yes, the
believable.
stories have to be believable.
With anything,
Yes,
you
we know
gotta
that.
find that balance. You gotta be careful not to break an audience's sense of reality. You know, the suspension of
you can't break the
disbelief
suspension of
has to remain
disbelief. Yes,
intact.
we
Don't
know
break
that.
it. It's, well,
Really?
it's like a franger. You
What?
break that
What are you
and,
talking about?
well, everything's gonna fall apart.
What you're about to see is not a movie. Not a frame of this has been doctored, hasn't been manipulated in any way.
Yes, everything needs to make sense within the story. Nothing which happens within a story can be too far removed from the reality set forth by the story or the mechanics of that reality. A film still has to follow some logic. We all know that, yes. You're just stating the obvious again.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes it's just gotta be said. Gotta put it out there. Be explicit about some things.
I know.
A film, it just can't go and kill a character off, have them appear in the next scene like nothing happened, like it's no big deal. You can't have them be hit by a car, shoulder, break something and just shrug it off, not without an explanation. And you know that kind of thing drives me crazy.
Yes, I'm aware. Anything which threatens to disconnect the audience from a film is, well, it's not a good thing, is it? It's bad. Let's just say it. It's really not a good idea.
Buying all aces, mate. Couldn't have said it better myself.
You want the audience to believe the events within are functional. You want them to retain that suspension of disbelief so they can remain connected or invested with the story. It has to obey its own logic and the mechanics set forth within that universe.
Yeah, that'll work. Films, stories, they need to retain a consistent logic within that universe. And found footage films do their nature. Having it so that one of the characters of the film or the ones recording everything, there's a kind of implicit grounding for the audience. In typical films, the camera is disconnected from the action, from that reality. The screen is just displaying the reality of the film to the audience. But in found footage, the camera wants a point of view of one of the characters. So it is one of the characters. So it's forced to be grounded within the reality of the film. It lends credence to believability.
That doesn't make it any more believable. More often than not, I'm wondering why the person behind the camera is still filming. I'm wondering, who is this asshole? Who is this person they're just thinking that they should stand there and continue recording. Why are they just standing there? Why aren't they helping anyone else in tense moments? I can see that they're not running away, and I don't understand.
So long as you are behind that lens, you are indestructible.
Because at times, what I'm seeing is crazy. What I'm seeing is intense and horrifying. They should be running. They should be helping.
Every photographer I know feels the same way. While you're shooting, you can't be hurt.
Well, you might be right about that.
So let me just say this. They're either in shock or cowards.
Sure. So anyway, a film's gonna have to explain that one. Maybe come up with a reason, but...
No, she's still making movies, man. This is my point here.
That's all I fucking have left.
Maybe that's just part of that ability to suspend disbelief. Films got to come up with a reason as to why someone might be involved enough in the events to want to document them.
I think capturing whatever paranormal phenomena is occurring or is not occurring.
But also unable or unwilling to help in some way. They got to feel that it's important, more important to continue filming than to anything else. So, you place the camera within the universe. You have the events recorded by one of the characters, documenting it all. In this way, it's a chief grounding for the audience. They're watching the events happening from the point of view of one of the characters. They're sharing in that character's point of view. So they all part of it. In a sense, it might be easier to transfer some of that character's feelings onto the audience. Maybe not always, but in theory, since the character is part of those events and as such, in a way, so is the audience.
No, I don't think that's true at all. It's not any more true than watching a regular film. I'm just watching those events unfold either way. Only in one of those am I wondering why someone is just standing around and filming. Oh, the camera is so shaky that I can't tell what's happening.
It maybe that's back to the suspension of disbelief again. The film has to be able to balance everything to make it believable. They need to construct a character, characterize them in such a way that you believe that they have a reason or want to document everything happening around them. And the events, the story, it has to remain subdued or grounded enough that the audience won't think that the person filming needs to stop, do something or run away. It's difficult to balance that, keep it interesting. But there is also a breaking point for any one person within the audience.
Yes, and my tolerance must not be very high.
I've noticed.
Either nothing is happening or I'm wondering why anyone is going to keep filming this.
But it has more of an excuse as to why events within a story need to be subdued, why they can't be maybe shouldn't be as fantastic. They need to be more grounded.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
sure,
weird.
there
The
are
only thing left of them
exceptions.
is
There's a spectrum with anything. On one end, the story's got a lot going on, a lot happening. On the other, nothing's happening. You got films like Cloverfield or the original Wreck or Quarantine. On the other, you got something like The Last Broadcast, The Blair Witch Project. It's all about finding that balance.
Is any of that inferring quality, or are you just throwing out titles? You know how I feel about The Blair Witch. It was boring, and Cloverfield, you can't see anything. It's shaking everywhere. The others, have I seen those?
Oh, we've chucked them on before. We've given them a watch.
What about Paranormal Activity? That one's pretty famous.
Oh, always forget that one. So many sequels that
I think Paranormal Activity 2 diverged from the single camera, the handheld recording, added security camera footage. There were times I didn't have to wonder why someone would be filming.
Anyway, point is that due to the low budget and the need to keep things more subdued and reasonable, they might have more of an excuse to have less happening. Keep things which do happen within a film subdued. Not break the immersion of the audience by being too unrealistic.
That kind of limits the films to a certain type, confining the whole genre to suspense then, aren't you?
Can I tell you a secret? I see dead people.
In a sense, maybe
You're confining everything to very little.
I guess I could.
Come on.
I'm not going to agree with you,
Really?
okay? I've liked the movies I've shown, yes, some of them.
Yes,
if
some
there's
of them.
intrigue, some discussion, maybe some disagreement
that could
between the
work.
characters of the film as to
guess.
whether or not something is
Someone's still
happening,
going to
the
wonder.
audience may not need to wonder why someone would be filming.
That sounds so thrilling and exciting, yeah.
It's just part of an investigation. And someone could be trying to prove that something is happening by documenting what they're experiencing.
But again, it's all good in theory. The whole defense of found footage. I might even agree with it, but only in theory. As far as applying it, I've really
now, a
can't
film
agree
it could maintain that suspension of disbelief
At least they can't get me in here.
by keeping some suspense, by not explaining too much, allowing characters in the audience to draw their own conclusions.
Facing death, the horrors of jail. Somehow he feels safer on the inside.
What you're saying is they can expand on a character's focus on the little things, maybe a slower, more meaningful movie.
Even though his story sounds like it might be a little bit, crazy and out there.
More suspense and more tension. It's more of the fear that something could happen.
They should be maintaining an atmosphere, keeping a mystery, have the characters question whether or not something is happening at all.
Are you sure?
Or a reason as to why they want to document the offense. Question or investigate everything is happening. Keep the confirmation that something is happening till much later in the film. Make the audience care and connect. Have them want to see what happens next in the story. Don't give it all away.
Josh? Where are you? Come on! I hear him!
Create intrigue. You might not need things to happen. Just keep the suspense as to whether or not something is.
That's a good theory, but I don't think it gets into practice. You're putting out reasons as to why things can be good, but you're ignoring the reality. No, these films are not good. They're terrible. I think I said it's a good theory, but I don't see it executed very well.
If that's what you want, the only thing then that I've caught is to provide some sort of evidence, some way to defend this thesis of mine, this theory. And as such, since you're the one making the complaint, I'm gonna have to drag you along with me for this defense of the indefensible, as you say.
I knew this was coming. I didn't want to believe it.
And you deserve all the horrors you bring upon yourself.
I heard about what happened last time with Dave.
And I had a writ of it. But how's the bludger doing? Still haven't talked to him since then.